Picture a dog moving a flock of 200 sheep across an open field, without ever touching a single one of them. No barking fit, no nipping at heels, no physical force at all. Just a low crouch, a fixed, unblinking stare, and a flock of animals many times its combined weight, rearranging themselves on command, because something about that stare convinced them it was safer to move than to stay put. From the edge of the field, it looks almost supernatural. A dozen-strong herd of prey animals bending to the will of one small predator that never even raises its voice. And a visiting stranger watching for the first time will usually ask the same question. What exactly is that dog doing that the sheep are so afraid of, when it never once gets close enough to actually touch them? That is not obedience training. That is psychological pressure, applied by an animal specifically bred for the ability to apply it. And it is the clearest possible demonstration that this breed's real specialty has never been strength. It is thinking faster than everything else in the field, including, frequently, the human holding the leash. First, the weapon that isn't a weapon at all. Herding trainers call it the eye, an intense predatory stare that some lines of this breed deploy almost like a tool, locking onto a single animal in a flock and applying enough psychological pressure that the sheep moves simply to escape the sensation of being watched that closely. Dogs with strong eye can stop, redirect, or hold an entire flock in place from a distance, using nothing but posture and gaze, a technique that took shepherds generations of careful breeding to refine, because it depends on a level of focus and self-control most working dogs simply do not have. A dog using strong eye effectively looks less like an animal chasing prey and more like a predator that has already won the standoff before anyone moves. Too much eye, though, and the technique backfires entirely. A dog that stares too intensely can freeze a flock in place out of pure terror instead of guiding it, which is why breeders spent generations calibrating exactly how much pressure was useful and how much simply caused chaos. Second, the conversation happening at a distance most people never notice. A trained sheepdog working a hillside will often be hundreds of meters from its handler, well beyond shouting range, responding instead to a series of distinct whistled commands, each one tied to a specific direction, speed, or action, often layered into longer sequences that effectively function as short sentences built entirely out of pitch and rhythm. That requires a breed capable of holding complex, learned instructions in working memory, while simultaneously reading the unpredictable behavior of dozens of moving animals and adjusting its own position in real time, all while the handler issuing the commands cannot see the dog's exact angle, speed, or the specific sheep causing trouble at any given moment. Shepherds did not breed for a dog that simply obeys. They bred for a dog capable of interpreting intent across real distance and translating it into independent, intelligent action, which is a fundamentally different skill than basic command following, closer to delegation than to obedience in the way most people use that word. Third, the dog almost the entire breed descends from. Modern Border Collie bloodlines trace back overwhelmingly to a single dog born in 1893 named Old Hemp, a sheepdog whose herding style, much calmer and more controlled than the rougher working dogs common at the time, impressed shepherds enough that he was bred extensively throughout his working life, reportedly siring well over 200 puppies before he died. Old Hemp's specific combination of intensity and self-control became, in effect, the template the entire modern breed was built from, which means most Border Collies alive today share meaningful ancestry with one specific dog whose herding style happened to look more like quiet psychological pressure than brute physical effort. Breed historians sometimes point out the obvious tension in that origin story. An entire working breed renowned for genetic diversity in temperament and skill actually narrows back down, a handful of generations deep, to one influential individual, whose particular style simply outcompeted every alternative approach being tried at the time. Fourth, the dog that learned over 1,000 words. A border collie named Chaser, studied for years by a research psychologist, ultimately demonstrated the ability to correctly identify more than 1,000 distinct objects by name, retrieving the specific toy requested out of a pile of others on command. And further testing suggested she could also categorize those objects by type and respond correctly to simple instructions involving an object she had never specifically been trained on by name. Chaser's case, documented in published research, became one of the most cited examples in the broader scientific conversation about how much language-like understanding a non-human animal can actually demonstrate. And the breed at the center of that conversation was not a primate or a parrot. It was a dog originally selected for managing livestock on a hillside, with no evolutionary pressure toward anything resembling vocabulary at all. Fifth, the fight over what the breed was even for. When the American Kennel Club moved to formally recognize the Border Collie in 1995, a significant portion of the working sheepdog community pushed back hard, worried that show ring recognition would shift breeding priorities toward appearance, coat texture, head shape, gait, and away from the working ability the breed had been selected for since old Hemp's era. Many working breeders continued registering dogs through organizations focused purely on herding performance rather than conformation showing, a direct, deliberate attempt to keep the breed's defining trait, functional intelligence, under pressure, from quietly drifting into the background the way it has in several other working breeds once they entered the show ring and started being judged primarily by appearance. The disagreement was, at its core, a fight over which version of Border Collie would survive into the future. The one shaped entirely by what a hillside full of sheep actually demanded, or the one shaped by what looked most impressive, standing still under bright lights. 6. The cost of all that processing power. The same intelligence and drive that makes this breed extraordinary at sheepdog trials becomes a serious liability in a household that cannot give it an outlet. Border Collies kept as companion pets without sufficient mental and physical work routinely develop obsessive repetitive behaviors, fixating on shadows, light reflections, or moving vehicles, and frequently attempt to herd anything available: children, joggers, other pets, nipping at heels in an instinctive effort to control movement that was never actually theirs to manage. Owners who fall in love with the breed purely from videos of its athleticism and intelligence are often unprepared for what that same brain looks like when it has nothing demanding enough to solve, which can mean hours of pacing, barking at nothing visible, or destructive chewing aimed at working off mental energy with no other outlet available. Shelters and rescue organizations dedicated specifically to the breed report a steady stream of dogs surrendered by owners who fell for the breed's reputation as the smartest dog alive, without understanding that the same intelligence demands a genuinely demanding job to stay stable, not just a daily walk around the block. 7th, where all that drive goes when there are no sheep around. The breed's combination of speed, precision, and rapid problem-solving has made it the dominant competitor in dog sports built specifically around exactly those traits, including agility courses and disc-catching competitions, where Border Collies consistently outperform breeds with comparable athleticism, but less capacity for split-second course correction, frequently winning top placements at major international agility championships year after year, regardless of which handler or country fields them. These sports essentially repackage the herding brain into a new format, giving the dog a structured, intensely demanding task to solve in real time, which is functionally the closest thing to a flock of sheep that most suburban households can realistically provide. And trainers who work with the breed in these sports often describe the relationship less as commanding a pet and more as collaborating with a genuine problem-solving partner. 8th, the reframe. Worth sitting with the next time someone calls a dog just an animal. A border collie working a hillside is not following a script. It is reading dozens of independent, unpredictable variables, an entire flock's worth of subtle body language in real time, adjusting its own behavior continuously to manage an outcome no single command could fully specify in advance. The eye, the whistle response, the obsessive need for a job, all of it points to the same underlying design. A brain built to process more, faster, than almost anything else on 4 legs was ever asked to. Refined across more than a century of breeding by people who needed exactly that. Not affection, not appearance, but raw, reliable cognitive horsepower, applied to a genuinely difficult problem every single working day. That instinct shows up shockingly early, too. Breeders and herding trainers routinely run young puppies, sometimes only a few months old, through a basic instinct test, exposing them briefly to a small group of sheep or ducks in a controlled pen to see whether the puppy naturally orients toward the flock, drops into a crouch, and begins attempting to position itself the way a working dog would, without ever having been taught a single command. Puppies that show strong, focused interest at that age, rather than chasing chaotically or ignoring the animals entirely, are typically the ones selected for serious working careers, which means the breed's signature talent is not trained into a blank slate. It is recognized, tested for, and then sharpened in a puppy that already arrived, carrying most of the underlying wiring. The next time a dog locks eyes with you and refuses to blink, remember that breed was selected, deliberately, for the ability to win that exact standoff against animals 50 times its size. And ask yourself honestly how confident you actually are that it isn't doing the same thing to you.